Hi everyone, this is a quick video for a wrap-up discussion of the Comparing Three Little Pigs, comparing and contrasting the four stories that I read to you. This organizer, I realized once I started writing in it very small spaces, I would have made it much bigger for my first graders. So if you felt like you didn't have room to write, that's totally fine. Don't get upset about that. This is also something we would probably do over the course of a whole week at school. So if you didn't do this or you're attempting to get started now because I hadn't read the rest of the stories, right? Don't be overwhelmed if it's taking you a while to finish it. So the four stories we read were The Three Pigs by David Weisner. That was the one where they were climbing out of their storybooks, right? Then we read The Three Little Wolves and the Big Bad Pig by Eugene Trevivzas. And then The True Story of the Three Little Pigs by A. Wolf, as told by John Ciesiska. I'm sure I've said that wrong every time I've said it. And The Three Little Javelinas by Susan Lowell. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to read you what I had on my organizer real quick. You can feel free to stop the video and add things to your organizer, or you can just listen or compare to what you had written down and see if we came up with the same things. So for the first story, for The Three Pigs by David Weisner, for characters, I put the three pigs, right? The big bad wolf. I also included the cat and the dragon that make it to the end of the story from the fairy tales that they went through. Those would be supporting characters, not main characters. That's why I threw them in there. If you didn't, that's not a big deal. The setting, I said the setting of the story was mostly outside, but the thing that's different about this story is the setting's also inside and outside different storybook pages, right? For example, the pigs escape their story and then they're flying around on storybook pages and going into other fairy tales. So that's a tricky one for a setting, and it's definitely different from all of our other books. So that's the way you would contrast those four books. So what I ended up doing as I went along, because there wasn't a lot of space, I put problem mostly where it says problem and solution, and then I included if I didn't have room, I put the solution over in the ending because it's kind of the same thing, right? So the problem was the pigs escaped their own story. The solution, I said, was their new character friends helped them stay safe from the wolf at the end, right? Because they brought the cat and the dragon back with them, who ended up scaring off the wolf. I wrote down something here about the ending. It says they lived happily ever after. That's something I picked up on almost every story as I went along in the organizer. So to start off, I said there were three main characters for similarities and connections. And I added things as I went along. So three main characters with one villain. That seems to be a theme for all four stories, right? Okay, so for the second book, The Three Little Wolves and the Big Bad Pig, for characters, I put three wolves, bad pig. For some supporting characters, I did add in the kangaroo, the beaver, the rhinoceros, and the flamingo, those characters that sold them all the different things to make their houses. For setting, I kept it simple. I said outside and then the different houses that they built. The problem, the big bad pig keeps destroying their homes. He was pretty mean out of all of the villains that we met in these stories, right? The ending and the solution to our story, pig ends up, remember, he sniffs those flowers and things just change. And he turns nice and they all live happily ever after. So that's when I started to make this connection. All right, I know it said the words happily ever after in the first story. It says it in the second one too. So for things that were similar, I started to write three main characters, happily ever after, and then some houses are being destroyed, right? That definitely happens in our first two stories. So moving on to our third story. Again, we wouldn't do this all at once, so I am rushing through it. Feel free to take your time with it or to just listen and come up with your own ideas. You can make your own organizer. This one was very small. It's just a good guiding start to to get started on a discussion. So the true story of the three little pigs, right? We have a specific name for our wolf here. So I wrote Al Wolf. There's three pigs. So far, the things that would contrast or are different in the first story, three pigs. That's the same as the third story and the fourth story, three pigs. But one thing that's a huge difference is that second story was three wolves, right? Okay, so back to the true story. Our characters were Al Wolf and the three pigs. That's all I put in there. I guess you could talk about Granny. He keeps talking about her, but we never really met her. If you put her in there, that's great. The setting, I said outside in the houses, right? Problem. Wolf needs sugar for a cake, and he has a bad cold. That is the source of all the problems, right? He says that none of this would have happened if he didn't need sugar and if he didn't have a cold and was sneezing. For the ending, I said that the news ends up framing him, right, for what had happened to the first two pigs. I don't know that is really a solution to the problem. He doesn't ever get to make his cake, right? And we don't know if his cold goes away. He's still looking for sugar at the end. In fact, at the very last page, he says, but maybe you could loan me a cup of sugar. I don't know that his problem's solved, right? I think the only characters whose problem is solved is the third pig because he doesn't get eaten, right? So for similarities and connections, based off of the three books so far, I put three main characters, right? Whether it's pigs or wolves. One villain or bad character, a wolf or a big bad pig. And then houses being destroyed. Now, friends, interestingly enough, this third story is the only story out of our four. I went back and added this in pencil after I finished the last one. It's the only one that doesn't have the words happily ever after at the end. So I thought that was a big connection to pick out, a big contrasting element in this third story. And then if we look at our last story, the three little javelinas, our characters are three javelinas, right, which we found out are cousins to pigs, so not actually pigs. And then our villain or our bad character is a coyote, which is very similar to a wolf. The setting for that story is out in the desert, right, and at the different javelinas' houses. I put the problem was coyotes trying to eat the javelinas, right? He says that from the beginning, and that's a huge problem. The way that problem is solved at the ending is the javelinas, they end up scaring Coyote away in the adobe brick house, right, by setting the fire, so he leaves them alone. So it also ends this story with the words, and the three little javelinas lived happily ever after. There's that phrase again. So that's when I realized that 3 out of the 4 books end with the phrase happily ever after. All of them except for the true story of the 3 little wolves. So yeah, and then one thing I put at the bottom that was a big connection I made for all 4 stories. I put that I had noticed that all 4 stories used some version of the dialogue or the bad character saying, "Let me come in." They all use those words at one point. They all have a different version of huffing and puffing to blow down a house, whether it's huffing and snuffing or sniffing like the wolf when he has a bad cold, or the big bad pig is using something to destroy the houses, right? So he says, "I'm going to destroy your houses." So they all have that in common. That is the one thing I found that they all had in common. I'm interested to know if you found other stuff that I might have missed, which is very possible. You guys have fantastic ideas. If you did take the time to do that organizer, or you're working on it now, that's awesome. I Wish I could read them in person, and I know you filled them out with fantastic ideas. So you can let me know either if you're watching this on Google Classroom, let me know in our comments what you think if I missed anything important, or you can leave a comment on a YouTube video. Thanks for doing that with me, guys. I appreciate you working from home, and I hope it was an activity that kept you guys a little bit busy while you're at home right now. So take care. Maybe we can do another one of these book studies, compare and contrast series, whatever we want to call it. Maybe we can do another one coming up. So I look forward to seeing you guys soon. Bye, guys. Have a good day.